All right, guys, we are back on Shattered Darkness. This is episode number 56. I'm Mitch Benner, your host, and with me, as always, is Elliot Ostrus, our co-host. How are you?
You're good, man.
Good.
A lot of new habits in the new year, and this year is the year of optimization.
Ooh, you're gonna have to tell me more about that. Dude, I just kind of like give it a little chill down my spine. I kind of agree, though, man. Like, yeah, I'm just feeling like this is the year of putting the pieces in place that help things grow, you know? So I totally agree.
Locked in, baby.
Here we go. All right, so just a little housekeeping things before we get started. We are in the basement of the Love Shack Mocktail Bar. They are our first real corporate sponsor. Just a little bit about them. 120 East 4th Street. They are the only mocktail bar in Northern Colorado. The environment here is amazing. Tons of sober people, sober curious. The space is massive. It's about 5,500 square feet. Mm-hmm. So really their biggest thing is events, graduations, birthday parties, whatever. You know, they've had yoga events, they've had rave events,
karaoke, comedy, open mics,
yeah, all kinds
wedding
of stuff.
parties.
So really great event space and games and things like that downstairs. But they make great drinks, great coffee. You can come here and work. All kinds of opportunities to just come in and hang out and support what these guys are doing. They're really supporting the sober community here in Loveland, and it's amazing, man. You got to come check it out. So the Love Shack Mocktail Bar, 120 East 4th Street. Come check it out, buy a drink, and hang out for a little bit. Also want to let you guys know about Beyond the Buzz. This is something that we started, more community involvement, trying to get connected with small business owners in our community that are sober, and just really trying to make some connections through that. So if you're a small business owner who is in sobriety and you're looking to connect with other small business owners and meet some people, Beyond the Buzz is a great opportunity to do that. It is here at Love Shack, 120 East 4th Street. It's every other Friday from 9:30 in the morning till 11 o'clock. There is one tomorrow. What's today's date? The 12th. So there is one on the 13th. So the next one will be 2 weeks from the 13th. And then every 2 weeks from there ongoing. So come check that out. It's a really, really good environment and, just supporting each other in business and sobriety. And then couple things on Shattered Darkness. We got some really awesome things coming down the pipe. We've made some partnerships with some content creators, some website designers. So we're really starting to design more of our website, a platform for you guys to go and engage with us, and kind of get access to more of our content and what we're all about. So we're super excited about that. That's probably about a month away, so stay tuned for that. But with all that fun stuff, I want to introduce our guest today. His name is Tristan Cuddon. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. How are you?
Doing awesome. I just want to say thank you for being willing to come on here, share your story.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yeah, get vulnerable with us, and hopefully we can shatter the darkness in someone else's life.
Yeah, for sure.
Dude, with that, we're just going to turn the mic over to you, bro, and kind of let you start with a little bit of your background. And
all right.
Kind of, who's Tristan Cuddon?
All right. Well, I'm not going to go through all of just the normal details of where I was born and all of that. You know, I'm going to go into the important details. I've been in therapy I've done probably over 1,000 hours of therapy since I was 16 years old. So luckily I've been able to identify a lot of what's made me the way I am and what overall makes me the person I am today. And so I'm really going to talk about a lot about like with my childhood and everything that happened there. Because I first want to start off by saying I'm very blessed by having the parents that I have. My parents got me the help I needed. They loved me through everything. They supported me through everything. And, my parents may listen to this podcast, and I don't want them to feel hurt in any way by the criticism of anything that I say. But, I learned at one point, I talked to them about their stories, about what their childhoods were like. And I learned very much why they raised me the way they did. And that generational trauma definitely a thing, you know. They inherited the trauma and lifetime experience that their parents had, and the broken skills, the broken the toolbox of broken tools that they had, and then they passed that down to me. And luckily, I get to break the cycle finally, you know. My parents, they did the best they could for me. They had me in their 30s, so they were more financially well off. So luckily, I didn't have to deal with that financial insecurity. I didn't have to deal with that when I was young. But that also, you know, having parents that were together, living in a middle-class house, having that money, that kind of made me feel like I was in a normal household. But then again, most kids think that their house and the way they were raised is normal, you know?
Everything's normal until you know better.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But I didn't recognize that. So one of my therapists described it as the victim triangle, where one parent is the hero, one parent is the villain, and I'm the victim. Both of my parents had very different ways of raising me. Well, my dad, he was very much focused on academics and pushing me forward in that sense. And in the evenings, we would go, mind you, this is when I'm like 6 or 7 years old. We would go over homework for hours. And I would be crying and I would be just overexerted. I was just a kid. And my mom would then start trying to stick up for me, and the arguments would start breaking out. And then on the opposite hand, my mom would try to instill responsibility in me. She would want me to do chores. She would want me eventually to get a job. She would want me to do those things, just pick up after myself. And my dad would make up for that so that I wouldn't get in trouble, because I wanted to test boundaries. I was going to see if I could get away with not doing those things. And even I remember I would tell my dad, I'm like, I'm going to clean up my dishes. Let me clean them up. And my dad would like sneak them downstairs so my mom wouldn't see them, so my mom wouldn't get angry at me.
Why do you think he did that?
I think there a lot of his life, a lot of it was guilt-based parenting. And my dad, he's very much a guilt-based person. He was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, and that religious trauma has been a major thing for him his whole life. You know, his mom was a hoarder, so he was never able to have friends over. So he struggled a lot with making those connections with other human beings, those normal connections. He'd bring a 97% home to show his parents, and his dad would say, "Where's that other 3%?" And my dad also has like genius level IQ. He's a veterinary neurologist, but I truly believe he is very much on the spectrum, and he struggles due to that high level of intellect. He struggles to make those social connections with individuals. There's just that disconnect there.
Well, and his brain works a different way, right? Like,
yes.
It's very academic. And,
yes.
You know, and then it sounds like it's very geared towards that.
Yeah,
you know?
100%. And he has very much an Al-Anon brain where it's very, very codependent. And at a young age, the dynamic was oftentimes I felt like the parent, and his mental health relied upon me. And so like when I got a B on my test when I was like in 4th grade, I would start crying because I would be worried to bring that home. And my teachers were telling my parents at a young age, they were like, "This isn't normal. Like this isn't good." And I was a very emotional child, as is. You know, I was very in tune with my emotions. I felt things very hard. And I started to show signs of, you know, what was to be early on, you know. I even though I felt those emotions, I had that intelligence, I was constantly testing things. I was constantly trying to branch out and do things that just the average child wasn't trying to push on. But, you know, then eventually I was exposed to video games, which would turn to be my first addiction. I was a really good kid. I didn't lie, I didn't steal, I didn't do anything like that. But I didn't recognize that this was wrong at the time. But I would lie to my parents so that I could go to a friend's house, because my parents didn't want me playing violent video games. And I would go to their house, and I would be hyper fixated on playing the video games with them. And I didn't recognize in my mind that this was wrong or anything. I thought I was just hanging out with my friends. But like, it was an escape. It was completely an escape. It was an escape from the homework. It was an escape from my parents having the tumultuous relationship, you know. I would sit there for like the last 2 hours of school, and I would like stare at that clock. And sometimes I would literally like run up my driveway, when eventually I was able to get a video game in my house, Age of Empires 2. Fucking sick ass game. Fucking sick ass game, dude.
That was a good one.
I remember I got that game, and it was right before my birthday. It was September 11th. I remember that day specifically because I had gotten Age of Empires 2 the day before September 11th, and I pretended that, you know, there were a lot of kids who went home because they were like shook up and shit, and I pretended that I was shook up from September 11th so that I could go home and play Age of Empires 2. And my parents were like, they were like looking at the TV as to what's happening, and they're like, should we be letting him play this game right now? And I'm like, yeah, you should. Yeah, this has nothing to do with that. Don't worry about this. Let me be the Japanese and have it make samurai and genocide other nations. But yeah, no, I used video games as an outlet for a long time, and I would get lost in that shit. I recognized very early on that I had a problem. I was very self-aware at a young age. Like, it was as early as the age of 13 that I recognized. I was like, this isn't normal. Like, I want to be able to moderate. I was trying to moderate at the age of 13. I was trying to only play a couple hours a day, and I was already installing software on my computer myself to moderate my time, and I would close my eyes and I would enter in a random password and click enter, and so I wouldn't know the password to stop the app. And then I would find a way to start my computer in safe mode so I could delete the application later on. So I was already doing the addict game at a very, very young age.
That's interesting.
That's
Interesting.
But, you know, aside from that...
Dude, can I ask you a question? Like, when you're upstairs in your mind, what's going on? Like, self-talk kind of vibe. Like, I'm just curious how your mind works, you know? Because it sounds like I can draw a lot of similarities, you know? But I'm just curious what that self-talk looks like upstairs, you know?
The self-talk nowadays is much healthier and constructive. I have a couple of, I'm dual diagnosis. I have bipolar type 2, manic depressive, and ADHD, and with the brain trauma on top of that. It definitely makes things a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
But it's much more fixated now on what, at least in today's world, it's much more fixated on what I can do to make today the best it can be, honestly. But it can become a very, very jumbled mess. I'm on medicated ADHD, tried a bunch of them. And so I saw a meme that was very accurate for it, where it's like, sometimes it's like you have 20 tabs open and 5 of them aren't loading, and there's music coming from somewhere and you just don't know where.
Yeah. I can relate to that.
Yes, yes, and it can be chaos some days, especially if I am not getting myself in order, or I'm getting myself out of whack with starting to become obsessed or getting enveloped with something, which is very easy for me to do, man. Like, working on the codependence thing, I can become codependent with anything.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick minute to cut out from our conversation and say, Elliot and I have noticed that about 75% of you guys that are listening to our content and engaging with us have not actually subscribed to the channel on YouTube. So right now, I would love it if you guys could just stop what you're doing, go click that subscribe button, you know, all the follow buttons on social media. What this does is it helps us grow our impact. It helps us grow our guest list, put together better content, basically grow our network, our brand, so that we can create better content for you guys. So it's a huge, huge help for us if you click that subscribe button right now. Thank you so much.
Anything. Like, when I was a kid, it was again, video games. Then then my uncle gave me Mountain Dew when I visited him in California, and that was not a good thing. And then it was goldfish, and then it was just.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
Dude, you were totally fitting that like gamer, like stigma. But I'm sorry, my brother's the same way. So like, he is hardcore gamer. Like we grew up playing video games together, and he's that. Like he's so smart, man. And like I could just never beat him ever. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how good I strategized, like he just beat me all the time. So it like kind of turned me off to video games a little bit because I just get my ass kicked all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's really cool.
Yeah, no. That was the way it worked, and you know, it was around. I was always a pretty popular kid in school, actually, but that's because I was a chameleon really well. Definitely people pleaser. I picked that up from having to disguise myself around my dad and having to put on the front that I was okay all the time with my parents because I felt like their mental health relied upon me. And it was around the age of 12 that my bipolar started coming out, and I started dealing with daily suicidal ideation. And I just thought it was normal for everyone to want to kill themselves.
Did that just kind of one day kind of pop up, or was it?
Looking back, it just, I can't fully recall. I think it gradually started as the thought of just wanting to die or not exist. And then it evolved into more, hey, I want to actively.
You know, and I wonder, because you said it's around 12, you're starting to go through puberty.
Yep.
At that point in your life.
Happens with a lot of bipolar kids.
You start to feel anxiety, you know, and real depression.
Yep.
You know, and because I just want to like make that correlation, because that's honestly, dude, when I think about my path and like my little inner child, it's that age that I relate to, you know what I mean? So.
And I felt very, you know, feeling very inadequate, feeling like an outsider, even though looking back, again, I got along with people really well. I had a lot of friends. You know, I was hanging out with my friends just about every weekend. We were going into the mountains and exploring and shit. And, you know,
it's crazy, isn't it? It's this mania. And I totally understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because when you break it down and look at it in reality, it's insane.
Yeah.
Right? You're just creating these stories that make sense to only you.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And so I totally understand. So when did, obviously you're going through those emotions, right? Dealing with the mania, the bipolar. When did alcohol and drugs and things like that start to come into the picture?
Okay. So what happened was high school. High school was when I found another group. I moved out of my like a little bit more nerdy group, like my nerdy safe friends who really didn't partake in that sort of lifestyle. Yeah. And then I moved on to the stoners and skaters, and I hung out with them. And also there were a couple kids on the bus at school that, had a hold of some opiates and things like that. And honestly, I wasn't an addict right away, even though I was struggling really hard with pornography. I discovered pornography when I was 13, and I was doing it multiple times a day, could not stop. Struggling with video games still. I had been really, especially World of Warcraft. But when I first smoked marijuana, it gave me a massive sense of elation, but I wasn't craving it. When I first drank, it was really fun. I drank a fucking massive amount of alcohol for the size that I was. I was very small. So that is a massive red flag popping up that I had that kind of tolerance, but I wasn't addicted to it right away. But the catalyst here was eventually one day my mom pulled up to school to pick me up, and she told me, I just told her flat out, I'm like, Mom, I don't know why my life is going well, everything's going fine, but I wanted. And so she took me to a psychiatrist. Like most bipolar individuals, I was misdiagnosed with major depressive disorder or just depression. But on antidepressants, I became super manic, thought I was God, and I was getting drunk and high every day before school. I was like laying on the floor, and then at the end of this manic episode, I broke into my neighbor's house in broad daylight and stole over $5,000 in jewelry. And I had no intention on doing anything with it. Literally, I brought it to school and put it in my locker. And my best friend, who shared my locker with me, saw me, and he was like, I didn't see anything. And then he walks off. Because I literally, yeah. What am I gonna do with $5,000 in jewelry? But I was just high off my ass on my mania. And so my parents found a black pearl earring in my pocket, and they had been informed about the burglary, so they pulled me out of school, and they were gonna turn me in. And my grandmother had died that morning, so my mom is just sitting there crying, and my dad is kind of still, and I'm just in the backseat smiling because I can't feel any emotion but happiness at that point. And so they turned me in, and I'm in like handcuffs giving my statement at the police station, smiling and happy, and because I can't not be. I'm fucking chemically just
whacked.
Yeah, exactly. And
do you mind if I ask you how much medication they had you on?
It was only it was just a normal dose of antidepressants.
So you're just obviously the wrong kind of medication for you.
It's a very typical outcome for bipolar individuals. But what happened was I was put on ankle monitor and then taken off of the medication. And it's kind of, you get taken off of the antidepressant and you're put on mood stabilizers. So with mania, when you are done with the manic episode, you crash really hard into a mixed episode. And that's why as an adult, I manage my mania so well, because it is super fun to be manic, but it's super dangerous. It's incredibly dangerous. I've made some of the worst decisions of my life while manic. But back when I was a kid, when after I got my ankle monitor on, I was coming to school with shorts on because I just didn't give a fuck, and girls loved that. Like I started dating my first girlfriend a couple days later. Like we were going to end up dating anyways, but she told me later on the ankle monitor turned her on, and then my girlfriend from the next year told me that she recognized me as hot ankle monitor boy, because that's how she first came to know me.
Dude, it's crazy to me. My wife's the same way, bro.
God.
They just are attracted to chaos.
Yeah. Oh God. But no, that summer was hell. Because I went through just psychosis. Because I was coming off of the mania, and it literally takes a couple months for the bipolar meds to build up in your system. So it was a complete summer from hell, just pacing around in my driveway for hours at a time. Couldn't have friends over. The isolation was killer. I was on ankle for 3 months, and then I got off and I lost my virginity. And on that day, I knocked up my girlfriend.
Wow.
So that was, because being a sex and relationship addict, that is part of my story as well. I hadn't really experienced that prior to this girlfriend, but luckily later on in the summer, my parents discovered our text messages towards one another because we were deciding to keep the child, but then my parents informed her mom, and her mom had a discussion with her, and luckily they did make the right decision for her to have an abortion, because I would have been a completely an absent father, and she never would have been able to pursue college or anything like that. Luckily, I've been able to make amends to her for everything that happened throughout the couple years following this and my addiction. And, she has a kid, she's working as a teacher, she went to college, she got to do all of that. And so she made the right decision, but it was very difficult at the time. But I was stable during this period of time because I was actually on medications, wasn't using drugs, wasn't using alcohol. Couple months after the abortion, my parents got divorced because they're just fundamentally incompatible with one another. That's just how it is. And I didn't take it personally at all. Like they were worried that I was going to. I was happy for them because I wanted them to be happy, and it was very obvious for a long time that they were not meant to be together. They functioned really well as best friends, but just not on that romantic compatibility. But so I luckily, I was charged with multiple felonies for the burglary, and I got a deferred sentence. And I was very blessed that they didn't do a final UA on me, because this is where some of that addict shit starts to come out. In my last month of probation, I decided to eat some edibles because I was hanging out with the friends, and I was close to the end of probation. And right there, when I was 17, it just clicked. After I ate those edibles, the phenomena of craving was there. And within a month, I was going out in the middle of the night to steal money from my parents. I was breaking into vehicles honestly, a lot of it was just for the fuck of it. Yeah. But it was also to get money. I would get high and I would do that. And this was just with pot. And because of my bipolar meds, I described it to my therapist. I described what he asked me what marijuana did to me, and I described it to him, and he's like, "Yeah, if marijuana did that to me, I'd get high every day as well." And so,
what did it do to you?
Just the levels of euphoria and creativity, and it just allows my brain. It was allowing my brain to just.
It's almost like access. You know what I mean? To this other side of your brain.
Yes.
Yes. I totally know what you mean.
Yes. And originally it was fun, and I was partying with friends, and we were sharing like camaraderie. But even my friends were within 6 months were already being like, "Hey, you're fiending for that shit." And they were calling out my bizarre behavior, my antisocial behavior surrounding marijuana abuse. Thank God my meds have made me intolerant to alcohol, so I would drink like 2 beers and I would throw up. Even though I tried, I would purposely skip my meds for like the day before I was going to go drinking, and I would feel awful. I would go through withdrawals from missing my medications, and I would still end up throwing up. And but I never drank without using drugs beforehand. So for like a period of a time, for like a year, I was just using pot, and then eventually got exposed to LSD. I got exposed to psilocybin. And then the winter of 18 came. picked up my first DUID. I had just gotten an adult, just gotten a super sick bong. Like it was a really cool bong, and I was all happy with it and all that. And yeah, the cops took it from me. It was.
Sorry, it's not funny.
No. It is.
God damn it!
I was angry. And of course, I was wearing flip-flops and shorts, and they were trying to give me the DUI test in like 10-degree weather, and I eventually was just like, no, just put me in the car. I admitted I'm high. Just go put me in.
I got fucked up, dude. Just take you to jail.
Yes. But like, yeah, and
Hilarious.
no, and I had also just gotten hooked up for theft at Walmart because. Well, I again, adrenaline stuff. I like to just steal for
Dude, we used to do the same thing.
adrenaline of it.
Yeah, we used to do the same thing.
And I thought there was no, like, I thought I was hurting Walmart when in all reality, no, I'm just never stealing from Walmart. Is that going to affect the big wigs? It's always going to affect the employees.
Sorry. Dude.
But
That's funny.
So that happened. I had my license revoked. I was skipping probation to the best of my abilities because I wanted to keep smoking. Pressure was building on me. Senior year in high school, I was skipping so much class that I had 30% in my classes. The only way I didn't get to walk at graduation, I had to do summer school to fucking graduate. And that was with my dad going to the school and harping on them to get me to graduate. So making excuses, saying that it was my mental health that's the cause for that, which it wasn't. It was just another excuse for me. I totally should have repeated my senior year. I didn't deserve that excuse at all. But my mental health was greatly collapsing. And it was my senior year where my first attempt came into play. It was around winter. I struggle with seasonal affective disorder really badly. So around November, December, January, it feels like the world is just collapsing in around me, and I can hardly function sometimes. And, the relationship with my dad was very vitriolic. And one night we got in an argument. Oh no, he came in and discovered me smoking weed, I believe, in my room. And there was this big argument, and I took probably at least over 100 different pills of my different scripts. And yeah, it was probably the most peaceful moment of my life as I was sitting there starting to seize out with my hands hitting the wall, and I was laying in a puddle of my own vomit, and I knew I was gonna because I had been wanting to for a long time. Since when I'm taking my medications and I'm doing things healthily, I don't struggle with that. But when I'm using drugs, it's a vicious cycle because it makes my medications work less. So I use more drugs and alcohol to cope with the fact that my medications aren't working, and then the medications work less. And so it was just this vicious cycle of my depression getting worse and worse, and my behaviors getting more and more out of control, and the legal system catching up to me, and my personal relationships falling apart. And so, yeah, I seized out for about 8 hours, bit off a portion of my tongue. My mattress was soaked in blood. And my dad woke up and heard this banging, and it was my head hitting the wall from the seizing out. And luckily he discovered me. It was about 30 minutes until I was going to and called the ambulance, and I was taken in, and I was in a medical coma for about 3 days.
Jesus.
And they had to pump charcoal into my stomach and move. My tongue was so swollen, they had to get I was stopping breathing, so they had to get a tube in. Went to Mountain Crest when I came to, and,
Do you remember anything about that?
About Mountain Crest.
No, about experience.
After
Attempt.
After I passed out, all it was I was laying in a puddle of my own vomit, very peaceful, and passed out. Woke up 3 days later with a catheter in, and I was really high because I was manic because of my medications. And then, did I go? Yeah, I was on the juvenile side. I was on the juvenile side of Mountain Crest, and it was crazy. There was this. I got to see what. It was a bit of a humbling experience because I got to see an 8-year-old who was in there because he was trying to stab his parents at night, and they had to lock the doors to protect themselves. And every time the parents would leave, they were just bawling hysterically. And so it was an interesting experience, but it definitely wasn't enough to get me sober. That's for sure. Alcohol and drugs had nothing to do with that attempt whatsoever. I went right back out and started living my life the way I used to.
What year was that?
That was 2008? Yeah. Yeah. It was 2000. It was either 2007 or 2008. And then it was about a year after that of continuing the same behavior, the same crazy shit, that another incident with my dad happened. This time around, I was actually on probation. But I was supposed to do community service, and I had lied to him about doing my community service, of course, because I lied about everything. And another argument broke out. I still don't remember what he said to me. But what ended up happening was I ended up somehow getting a hold of. Let me explain this incident because it's a lot of like little god shots. So I was driving a little Volkswagen Beetle at the time, and I was planning on overdosing, but this time I was planning on getting in my vehicle and driving out to the middle of nowhere, smoking weed, and then taking the pills because I won't throw up, and then I'll just have the overdose and blah 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 blah. But my Volkswagen was snowed in, so I couldn't drive it. And so I don't remember anything after 5 p.m. that day. I was off to go buy some cigarettes, and I was contacting people about getting weed. And somehow I got into the country to get my mom's truck. And I was parked along the side of this highway when a cop pulled up on me at like 1 a.m. And the cop asked to talk to me. I said no. We got in a high-speed pursuit, and I drove off a hill at over 100 miles an hour, and I flew 300 yards and smashed into the ground. Yeah. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt because I was determined to. That was my goal, and I thought that driving off the hill was it. But so 300 yards, hit the ground. I smashed into the steering wheel, flew in the cab of the truck, and it was smashed instantly. Or flew into the back of the truck, and the cab was smashed instantly. And then it skidded another 200 yards, and it was about 6 feet underground. And so the officer came out.
Sorry, I'm trying to wrap my brain around that.
Yeah. So I actually have talked to the officer, and so he told me he walked out into the pasture, and he heard me making like the death rattles, which is what people do when their body's starting to shut down. They're just not able to swallow the phlegm in their throat anymore because their muscles are starting to shut down. And so they were extracting the vehicle like they were extracting a dead body. They pulled me out of the mess and cut my clothes off. I was in like 10-degree weather and snow, and I actually requested the photos of my car accident at one point, but they never got back to me, and I didn't understand why. But then I was finally informed that my naked, bloody body is in those photos, and that's probably why they never contacted me, was they didn't want to traumatize me. But Flight for Life came and grabbed me. But so the reason I mentioned the Volkswagen earlier is, had I gone done this accident with my Volkswagen, I would have been wrecked. There's not a chance in hell I would have survived. That thing would have been, it just exploded. And due to the snow on the ground and everything, I thought going off the hill was the best chance of killing me. No, had I gone off anywhere else, the truck would have just kept flipping and it would have just wrecked me. So actually going off that hill saved my life. And also not wearing the seatbelt, that saved my life, because had I been stuck in the cab, that would have killed me. And that's apparently a 1 in 1,000 chance. So
let me ask, what does it do to you psychologically to know those things?
it helps keep me alive. And it also, a lot of times, has helped me not try to again, because I've recognized that I'm like, dude, I've tried really hard a couple times now, and I don't want to experience the consequences again, because I broke 18 bones. My brain hemorrhaged for 2 hours. I've lost multiple teeth. Yeah, like, and I'm just
by far one of the craziest stories we've
yeah. It's
There's one other one that resonates in my brain that's like wild as fuck, and that one is like right up there with it. That is absolutely insane.
Yeah. I was in a medical coma for a week because I was in so much pain that if I was conscious, I would have had a heart attack. And so I was supposed to be paralyzed waist down, and I was supposed to be a vegetable, but like the doctors were pretty amazed. And then honestly, I do think part of that is honestly because I was under the influence of probably a lot of marijuana. There's some research that shows that individuals who sustain traumatic brain injuries or brain damage while being under the influence of THC, it lessens the effect. So that may very well have to do with it. I don't know. And honestly, I don't ever want to experiment with that again. But
are you spiritual at all?
Oh yes, I have God and faith tattooed on me and in their arms. I got those when I got out of rehab. I was raised to be devoutly atheist, raised to be devoutly anti-God. And I was told by enough nurses while I was in the hospital that there's something looking after you, that I was able to acknowledge that there's something out there, because I had about 30-second memory span for 3 weeks, I'd say. And then I finally came to, and apparently when I was in my brain damaged state, what I kept asking was, what happened? Was anybody hurt? And then I'd say, thank God. And then my memory would reset. But also there were some fun instances where I was nearby the helicopter pad, so I would think that there were aliens landing. Or one time I was on this weird oxygen machine, and I was acting like I was hitting a bong. And then one time my mom told me she was walking me down the hallway in my wheelchair, and I was looking up at the lights like magically, and I was like, Mom, in this world is pot legal? So like, yes. So like, even in that state, I was a nice dude. Like, I would actually apologize to the nurses for screaming in pain and all of that, but I was still a stoner in that mindset. I still was determined to smoke weed. But I forgot the majority of my life. I forgot like 75% of my English. My pelvis got dislodged from my spine. I was missing my front teeth and this tooth. I had burns and cuts all over my body. My left arm was barely usable. It was rough. I was sleeping 20 to 22 hours out of the day. And at the same time, I had picked up 6 felonies, and I was on the front page of the Denver Post and Coloradoan, and I was looking at 20 years in prison. Which is completely fair, because luckily I didn't pass any vehicles that night, but I could have easily have endangered individuals' lives. But I got out of the hospital at about a month mark, and it was like 2 months later that I was able to walk again. And, I took the steps forward to get myself upright and walking, and I used crutches for about half a day instead of 3 months, because I'm very stubborn and that's just who I am. And then it was like within a couple of weeks that I was smoking weed again. And that's just, I wasn't fucking ready. But I am so glad that I burned my life to the ground at an early age. Like, my lawyer managed to get me 3 years of supervised probation, 180 hours community service, all of this because the judge acknowledged that I was given a life sentence. Like, the doctors have told me I'll be in the wheelchair at the age of 40. I don't believe that, but like, my likelihood of increase to stroke, Alzheimer's, dementia, exponentially higher because of everything I've done to my body. My body just, it doesn't function the same way that a normal person does because my hips are held together with fucking metal. And that's a natural consequence of what I've done. And so I take better care of myself than the average individual, especially supplement wise. And I was invested in that in my 20s. But, you know, I wasn't quite done yet. And luckily, well, I fell upon spice for a period of time.
That shit.
Yep.
You know what I learned about that?
What?
Fucking alcohol classes.
Yeah.
I got a DUI when I was 23, and I learned about that shit in Rehab. But anyways.
I thought because it was legal,
Yeah, why
it
not?
was safe.
Fuck,
But
dude, that stuff was gnarly.
I was so addicted to that shit. And
So,
and
I thought I was going to have a heart attack when I smoked that shit.
yeah, I overdosed on it at one point and wound up in the hospital because I was throwing up so much I couldn't breathe anymore. And even then, it was probably one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. And I was back on it a week later, and that didn't change. That didn't change me from using it though. But I did inevitably end up. So I'll get to the point that really broke me down and got me into rehab. So I was continuing this cycle of behavior of smoking spice, skating by, just really self-destructive behavior while all being on probation and not working a job and still stealing and conniving and lying. I ended up getting in a relationship with a very broken girl. Big surprise. I have always enjoyed focusing my energy on other people, because it's a lot easier to focus on somebody else than myself. And to be the savior and, I'm going to rescue her. And I'm stopping her from killing herself, and I'm rescuing her from her abusive environment. And things escalated way out of control. You know, it ended up with a personal protection, PPO in place. And then a violation of that, getting arrested. And eventually, I thought there was just a warrant out for me, and so I stopped attending probation appointments. I wasn't going to my house anymore because I was worried the police were going to pick me up at any point in time. Started smoking pot again because that honestly was the only way I could get off spice. I didn't know how to get off that shit. I was having to smoke it like every half hour. I was so addicted to it. My spit was black. I was throwing up black. It was gross. And so I lived in a friend's house basically for the whole summer, just wanting to use enough drugs to die. And I had court. I attended my court event because we both ended up violating the PPO for a second time, and I thought I was going to jail for sure. And my lawyer worked out something, worked out a deal where I could go to rehab, and I would escape those punishments. Well, my probation got extended a year, but Originally, I was supposed to do 3 years, and at the end of it, I ended up doing almost 6 years and 240 hours community service and at least 90 days of jail time. So, but I ended up going to Harmony Rehab, and God, I was such an obstinate little fuck, but it was such an amazing place. It saved my life. I have a tattoo of the Harmony emblem on my leg, actually. It absolutely changed my life. And my therapist there, we each get assigned a counselor. My counselor was, she was rough. Like, she was really hard, and I needed someone who was hard on me to break me down, because when I was reading my parents' like impact letter to me, didn't faze me at all. Didn't cry at all. She made me cry, though. She pointed it out to me and was like, how are you not fucking fazed by this? How is this not bothering you? And I needed somebody like that. And when she told me I was going to sober living afterwards, I threw an absolute temper tantrum about it. And I almost got kicked out because of the level of tantrum I threw about it. But, you know, she basically said, I'm going to tell your probation officer you're being non-compliant. And I went to initially this Christian sober living up in Crested Butte. But again, here comes that codependency. I immediately got in touch of the ex. We still had the PPO against one another. PPO. Yes. And I made an excuse to come down to Loveland's sober living. Because I had seen some of the gentlemen from that group had brought a meeting up, and I liked them. And so I did genuinely want to do that. It just wasn't a good idea being closer to your people, places, and things, you know, that you did when you were in your addiction. Not a smart idea. And especially because the day I came back, I was doing a tour of that house. I picked up my ex, and I still don't know how the police knew, but the police knew. And I got arrested out front of the sober living house, and everyone was laughing because they're like, wow, you were the one with the person with the shortest stay here ever.
And it's been 1 hour.
Oh, God. So, yeah. But I ended up being able to come back, and it was after that, so sober living was an absolutely wonderful experience for me. Oh my God. I was so happy and spiritual, and I was going to meetings once or twice a day, and I was surrounded with people who supported my recovery. And yeah, there were people who relapsed, and the sober house leader was completely living in addiction, was financially abusing the tenants. But like, I was just riding this pink cloud, man. And I remember I had court again because I had violated the PPO again. And it was the day before I had all this anxiety because I was like, dude, I might end up going to prison. And I just fully accepted. Before I had been like, if I'm going to prison, I'm going to, because there's no way I'm fucking doing that. And the day before I went to court, I just had this peace and serenity across me that was like, no matter what happens, I completely accept it. And that is absolutely fine. And went into court. Luckily, it was like, I think it was like 90 days of work enders, which is technically 90 days jail time. And my probation was extended yet another year. And then the judge told me, if you see her on the side of the road dying, keep driving, because next time it's a stalking. Yes. That's the type of choice that I used to make with women. And so I stayed in sober living for the next couple months. I was in sober living for 3 months, and I attended about 400 hours of AA meetings in that period of time. I didn't work with a sponsor. I wasn't willing to work those steps, man. I wasn't ready yet. And so I got out of sober living, and my roommate was an ex-blood member, and he had a hookup for weed down in Denver. And, my dad was out of town for a bit, so I'm like, I'm going to be a sober pot dealer, and I'm really happy, and I can do this. And I went back to hanging out with my old friends and going to parties sober, and I was still really happy, but it was like 6 months, 3 days sober, and I was like, you know what, I can take a hit or two of pot. And then it was 3 days later, and I did some mushrooms, and I was like, you know what, I'll just stick to the organic stuff. And then it was a week later, I did for the first time, and the next day I got arrested, and I ended up going to jail again. And it was just this cycle, man. Like, for the next, honestly, just about 10 years. Like, I luckily I got off probation at a certain point, because I was able to pull myself together enough. But I would get like a few months of sobriety, relapse, get 6 months of sobriety, relapse, a year of sobriety, relapse. But what continually would happen was I would always start doing well in sobriety, and instead of plugging into the community or the group or a sponsor or things like that, I would get a girlfriend every single fucking time, because I couldn't do it alone. That codependence that always relied on me. And then I would end up spiraling away and no longer doing the things that were making me healthy anymore. And I just repeated that cycle over and over and over again. And life was really miserable. I'm not gonna lie. I was just a dry drunk. I was just doing the exact same cycle over and over again, just in different people, places, and things. And honestly, I only really spent maybe 6 months of the last 15 years of my life actively using substances. But I've only spent probably maybe 3 years of the past 15 years of my life really actively in recovery. That's the thing. Because just because I'm chemically abstinent doesn't mean that I am sober by any means. I've done more damage to people in sobriety than I did in addiction and alcoholism. I know last year I got to make amends to my most long-term girlfriend in sobriety. And even though I relapsed once when I was with her, that wasn't when I did a lot of damage. But that amends ended up being almost 3 hours long. I was done with my bit because I owned up to my shit in a general way in about 15 minutes. Then she pulled out 2 sheets of paper and she's like, do you remember this? Do you remember this? Do you remember this? And like, I was crying. Like, I didn't remember all of the shit I did because I am so selfish and narcissistic when I'm in my shit. And it is so easy for me to backslide and get into that and feed into those character defects and feed into that person that I am. Because that's little Tristan. That is who I was. That is the toolbox that I used when I was a child. That's what got me by when my parents were arguing at night, you know? And I'm spending my whole adult life unlearning those behaviors. And I started this journey a long time ago in therapy. Not just in AA. Therapy has been absolutely key for me to be successful.
Why?
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 Because they helped me start to really recognize the pattern of behavior. They started to help me recognize that the way I was living was unmanageable. They started to help me put tools into my toolbox that were useful. I have a very, I look at things from a clinical perspective. I've worked in psych hospitals. I've been in therapy before. I've worked in detox units with alcoholics and addicts. I do believe, I'm very supportive of AA. AA has been absolutely necessary for me to get sober, but I also have a lot of critiques on AA. I believe AA is not the only way, and I believe a lot of them are incredibly closed-minded to dual diagnosis situations. Even though Bill W. and Dr. Bob specifically talked about, like, they don't have opinions on outside issues, and, like, it's very commonplace to see individuals with these dual diagnosis situations. And me managing my bipolar disorder, my depression, my ADHD, my brain trauma, that is as key to my sobriety as fucking using the substances themselves. Yeah. And the most common thing I see individuals abuse in the rooms is other people in sex. I see people abuse that all the time, and it is not talked about. And I've been a member of groups that are much more progressive or forward thinking, honestly, where they are open to discussing those sorts of things, discussing outside addictions. And I understand to a degree, hey, we have to keep things focused, centered around alcoholism, but the alcoholism, that's going to come back up if I start feeding into those other things.
Dude, and honestly, in my opinion, alcoholism is a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's really, it's the stuff that you're talking about. It's managing the package that you were given up here, right? That keeps us away from that. Like, that's what we've said it a bunch of times, right? Like, you rip the Band-Aid off to clean out the wound, you know, and the wound is the inner child, right?
Yeah.
And we were talking about this in therapy the other day, like, that toolbox that you created is no longer useful. It protected you.
Yeah.
It kept you alive. But now it's no longer useful to manage your life.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It just creates problems. And so that's something I've learned, right? It's like, okay, so now you got to have that like piece where you're like, okay, now I got to change my habits, right? So, and I agree with you, right? If you're using sex and you're using those things in codependency, you know, to make yourself feel good and to avoid what's going on in your heart, right? Like that's the addiction.
Yeah.
Right. That's the problem. That's the wound.
Yeah.
Right. And alcohol and drugs are just a symptom to make you feel better. You know, and so I completely agree with you. Yeah. You know, and that's why I think that AA and things like they need to have different branches, right?
Yeah.
Of dual diagnosis. You know, because really, I mean, at the end of the day, it was the same thing. I was diagnosed mildly bipolar with a severe mood disorder, you know, and so they put me on medication for that. Dude, had I known that 20 years ago, maybe I wouldn't have gone through all the things that I went through, you know? So I think you're right. I think and that's what we're trying to do here, right? Is highlight like your story. Addiction is common, but Tristan Cuddon is unique and individual, right? And so your story is going to be so much different than the guy we had on last week. Yeah. You know what I mean? And this is something I was talking to my psychiatrist about, but she's like, we just don't understand that addiction center. You know, it's how can I smoke meth once? Yeah. And be addicted to it for the rest of my life. But old Tim over here has smoked it for 20 years and could take it or leave it. You know, and I'm like, that to me is an obvious answer. It's the individual. It's the heart of the person. It's not a clinical thing, dude. You're looking at this and trying to generalize this one individual into this massive group of a diagnosis of addiction. You know, but you're not actually serving this individual and what's going on in their heart. You know, and that's where I think it's a very individual process. Even though it's easy to generalize, dude, the process to sobriety is 1 in a billion.
Well, and the matter of the fact is, this pisses off AAers a lot, but the 12 steps is a series of cognitive behavioral and dialect behavioral therapy. It is a clinical process, and that group therapy access, that the process of being together, that is super beneficial. Yes. I'm not going to lie. And having connection to a power greater than yourself. There is scientific evidence that shows that people who have a connection with that live happier, healthier, and less anxiety-producing lives.
Right.
So there is evidence towards all those things. And, prayer, if utilized correctly, is just another form of dialect behavioral therapy, saying, hey, give me the strength to do this, blah, 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 blah. And that's why those things do work. But it's that hyper-judgmental and closed-minded mindset that a lot of AAers have that does such a huge disservice. So I just stopped being the treatment rep for my group a few months ago, but I was the treatment rep for 5 years, and which means that I was bringing meetings to a variety of different treatment centers. I've brought I haven't even counted, but I've brought well over 50 meetings to different treatment centers in northern Colorado. And so I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands of alcoholics. Thousands probably, on the front lines who are still struggling, like in the depths of it, who do not want to go to AA, who have had bad experiences, and constantly, this is what I hear, is that judgment and that feeling of being unwelcomed. And I know that firsthand because I've been to certain groups where I have gotten that. But because I have the length of sobriety and the knowledge that I have, I can discard that. I can push that to the side and be like, that's not AA as a whole. I can find a group that will accept me. But for people who are brand new into this shit, that's going to stick in their head, and they're going to they're just not going to be about it. You know?
And honestly, it's this mindset of I'm looking down on you.
Yes, very much. And alcoholics, a lot of them have that mindset towards addicts. And it's like, dude, if you...
we already fucking hate ourselves.
Yeah.
We're already judging ourselves. So it's like the last thing I need is for somebody else to come in here who doesn't understand what the fuck I'm going through.
Well, and the funny thing is, a lot of these alcoholics who have been very judgmental towards addicts, I know that they've had issues with or other drugs as well. And so the thing is, if you have the addictive brain, you can be addicted to anything.
Dude, this is my opinion. Everybody on fucking planet Earth is addicted to something.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, ours is just the one that causes us to burn the fucking world. You know what I mean? And so it's very easy to identify, right? But I would say probably 90% of people on planet Earth struggle with technology.
That's true.
Facebook.
Phone is fucking...
I mean, you want to remove yourself from a situation and not be present for your children?
Yep.
Get on your goddamn phone.
Yep.
But we don't talk about that.
No.
Because... And that's causing more friction and cracks in families than fucking alcohol and drugs. So that's my opinion. It's like, get off your fucking high horse.
Yeah.
And we actually, I wrote this in our origin story as compassion. I was like, I rarely experience it in a clinical sense. Rarely. Almost never. But since we've created this community, that's all we've experienced is compassion.
Yeah.
Anna Lepke's book, Dopamine Nation, is a really good one. At
Yeah.
the beginning of that book, she says, if you haven't found your addiction yet,
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
That's the thing. We're all trying to check out, and that's the society that we live in. And nobody's willing to ask hard questions anymore, right? No, and this is the thing that I love about your mentality is AA is a 100-year-old program, right? Times change, things change, people change. Why is it so bad to question authority? Why is it so bad to question the system? That's how we progress. That's how we grow.
Yeah.
Right? But people get fucking freaked out about it, and it's just like, sit down, shut up, listen, and hear people out individually, and that's really why we started this.
Yeah.
It's because it's easy to group everybody together, right? It has drugs and alcohol addiction, and we're going to go burn the fucking world down. But, dude, how many of those people have a dual diagnosis?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Half?
Yeah.
If not more.
Yeah. I ended up working for 5 years with a substance abuse counselor who's one of the leading substance abuse specialists in the United States. And so I got to talk to him when he went to a convention where a group of these individuals got together and they discussed the one common factor between all of us, and it is trauma.
Yeah.
That is hands down what is most linked between all of us. And because we have that trauma, we all have these incredibly broken toolboxes, and we have to learn new tools. And therefore, because that means it's directly linked to mental health matters. And I oftentimes find the individuals who struggle the most are the individuals who you can definitely tell they're putting on more of the hyper-masculine persona. They have to wear the mask. They can't truly talk about what is going on underneath the surface, which is truly a shame, because that's a huge disservice towards them. No, not just towards them, it's a disservice towards everyone in the community, because when you share like who you are, when you're actually able to be vulnerable, you can really make a difference in other people. Somebody out there might be able to click with you. I have shared in meetings before when I have felt suicidal. And I've had people come to me afterwards and be like, thank you for sharing that, because, you know, you're several years into the program and you still experience these sorts of feelings. And I thought that was abnormal. And it's like, no, like, you shouldn't, you're never going to be perfect.
Let's play that out. What if you didn't admit that, right? What kind of story are you telling yourself and you're creating in your mind, right? Like that's the issue in holding things in that people don't understand, is like you're lying to yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and by doing that, you're lying to everybody else around you, and you're framing it in this picture of like, oh, I'm tough and I'm this.
Yeah.
Be like, no, dude, if you want to be tough, like let's lay it all out there.
Yeah. And I used to be like that.
Me too.
And I kept relapsing because of it, because I thought it was the AA spelling bee where you had to constantly say what you hear.
It's almost like doctrine,
say,
you know? Yes. And it's not like this way of thinking. It's this action that we have to take, right? And it's the same thing with Christianity. I think that people really struggle with Christianity because it requires something of you.
Yeah.
You know, it requires you to admit that you are fucked up, right? And people don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want to admit they're wrong. They don't want to admit that there's things that are messed up in here. And I will never understand that. Never. You know, to me, I'm like, why would we not unpack that?
Yeah.
You know, that's where true healing happens. That's where true growth happens. You know, is in the fire, is in those areas, but we avoid it. You know, we know that it's going to produce something beautiful, but we avoid it. And I get it. You know, it's like, I get those emotions. You know, we're going through the same thing in our marriage right now, you know, where it's really difficult, you know, and we have to make these choices regardless of how we feel, you know, and it's really hard. But if we didn't have that platform of honesty and truth and that foundation, like, it would just become more of a mess. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it just builds up into snowball effect.
Exactly. So I love your mentality. I think it's amazing. I think we should always question everything, you know, and come at life with this mindset of like, okay, convince me.
Yep.
You know?
Very much in this past year, especially when I got involved in the electronic music community, and I started meeting a lot of individuals who recovery wasn't black and white for them. Recovery used to be very black and white for me. If you smoked marijuana still, you aren't sober. If you didn't do these certain things, you were just a dry drunk, blah, 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 blah. I've talked to so many people who conduct themselves in different ways of life and all of that. I've become so much more open. And because of that, I can represent AA on a different level. And at the same time, I can empathize and connect with individuals on a different level. And especially coming from it from a mindset of like, who am I to fucking judge these people, you know? And, you know, Bill W. and Dr. Bob, they said we don't have a monopoly on recovery. And there are so many different forms of it out there. And there's so many different ways to connect with it. And connect with spirituality and a higher power. And, you know, I have this strong, when I hear individuals say like, oh, there's only one true God, or there's only one way to follow spiritual practices or things like that, I know my mind kind of snaps shut. And so to think that I could possibly turn somebody off from sobriety, and I'm sure I have with my very stringent mindset in the past when I was, when my ego was more puffed up, that just does a huge disservice.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. And it removes compassion, right? And it's more this set of rules, and that's the kind of church that I grew up in, right? And it's like, if you don't do it, then fuck you, right? Like you screwed up, right? So it's this very black and white checks and balances system where life has never worked that way.
Yeah.
Ever. There's always going to be gray, and so I completely agree. And that's kind of like this is, it's like, we want to sit down with individuals, learn from your experiences, you know what I mean? And then, because I'm new to this whole thing too, like I'm barely 2 years into it. So, you know what I mean? And it's just, yeah, man. But I love your perspective on all of this. Seriously, man, and your engagement with the community is amazing. That's something that I've been convicted about, like getting more involved in stuff like that. So,
and I also really appreciate your honesty about, the groups, because I was talking to a really good friend yesterday about it, where the shares that are, I did the steps and my life is wonderful. I'm like, great. What's the minutia in there? Because it cannot be that simple.
No,
right?
it's not.
It's like, and I've really questioned myself, like, am I overcomplicating this? Am I doing something wrong?
No.
But it's not,
No, it's just that it's crazy when you finally hear somebody that you've been sitting with in the rooms for like 3 or 4 years, and they finally break down and they share something super vulnerable to them, and you're like, wow, so you are a human being.
Right.
Like that's the thing. And I know there are certain things that people, they may not feel comfortable sharing about, but at least be like, I'm going through a tough time right now.
Exactly.
You don't have, you can speak in a generalized manner about that, but that it's important to share that you experience those sorts of things. That's why I'm working with the ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics Anonymous sponsor that I'm working with now. When he was 30 years sober, he was a man I did not respect. I thought he was fucking crazy. And he says it himself. He's like, I didn't develop a relationship with God until I was like 32 years sober. And I was crazy, and I didn't know what I was doing. And then he worked the program, and he became a man that I really respected. And he was doing these things. He did this really hard work, and it made me want what he has. And I know several men in recovery where they were like 10 years sober, and they were like, I'm insane. My life is falling apart. Yeah. And I like to hear that because it reminds me that, hey, like, life's not gonna get easier anytime soon. I'm still really new into this. I'm only 3 years sober, and I'm just a baby, It took me over 30, I've learned behavior over 30 years, and I've only spent really solid 3 or 4 years trying to change that behavior. It's completely unrealistic to have expected myself to be a reformed human being by now.
Yeah.
That's just not the way brain neuroplasticity works. Right. It's going to take a long time of rebuilding these patterns and
habits, right?
Yes. Action. Yes, yes. And physical exercise, therapy, working individually with a sponsor, working programs. And I'm exploring Dharma recovery now because I'm not just doing AA. This year, I really am branching out. I'm taking all things into consideration: spiritual health, emotional health, physical health. It has been years since I have felt this physically good, and I'm finally really investing in the whole thing. And I don't want to just hold myself down by being stuck in, frankly, a cult mindset where I have to attend a meeting every single day, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. And yes, AA may not be a bad cult where you're going to end up drinking Kool-Aid and dying from the poison one day, but by all definitions, it is a cult. And I say that as a very strong member of AA. And I've been the president of a club that gets over 1,000 people in foot traffic a month for over 5 years. And I am still that president. But I'm going to be real, you know? But AA has saved my life. I will say that. And I need to practice a program of abstinence. That is how strong of an addict I am. That if I don't practice a program of abstinence, I will get fucked up. Because even if I drink too much caffeine, it triggers my midbrain. Like I will go through cravings. It's fucking crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah, and I know myself, even with video games, I've cut myself off of video games completely, because if I play a video game, I'll pick it up, and 8 hours later, I'll put it down, and I'll be thirsty and hungry, and I'll feel like shit, and I can't moderate with video games either. And I'm still battling pornography. I'll be completely frank with you. I watched porn last night. It's an addiction I was really working on with my old sponsor very heavily. Pornography is still one that I struggle with on a daily basis because it is so difficult because of this fucking phone. Because I have it at my fingertips. It would be like trying to quit pot freshly when I'm holding pot, holding pot in a lighter in my hand all day long, basically. It's fucking, yeah.
It's hard, dude. I struggle with that one too, and going through marriage counseling and stuff like that. Learning a lot more about it and just the psychological effects about it.
Yeah, it
really, because it never made sense to me until recently. I'm like, oh fuck, now I get it.
Yeah, it really damages our views on sexuality.
Totally, dude, and just disintegrates that relationship,
Yep, and it really damages intimacy.
Well, and I'm learning, to be vulnerable. I'm through all of this stuff, I'm like, dude, I don't even know if I'm capable of loving, love.
It's hard, Yeah, you're discovering who you are, and it's so because we don't know who we are, and it's like, how do we love if we don't really know who we are?
Fuck, man, that's deep. And there's going to be so many great shorts out of this interview. Dude, I completely agree. We're building our website right now, and the 3-phrase tagline that we used is shatter the stigma, own your truth, and find your purpose. Mm-hmm. And I think that if we can do those 3 things and end on finding your purpose, that's where you start to invest back into the world.
Yeah.
Right? When you really believe in who you are and you have confidence in your heart,
yes,
and trust the path that you're on.
Yes.
Right? And it requires going through those steps and doing that work and breaking yourself down. Mm-hmm. And then when you feel like you got there, you can start all over and do it again. Right? Because the path never ends, man. You never actually reach the pinnacle. You accomplish this goal and it's like, great, okay, what's next? And so that's something I've had to realize is there really isn't ever a top of the mountain. No, there's always going to be something that needs to be worked on, that needs to be fixed, that needs to be recognized, right? And understanding that, I feel like just kind of, it's like, okay, I'm going to choose, life is going to be hard over here. I know that. Life is going to be hard over here. I know that, but this is at least going to lead me in the path that I want to go.
So a quote that a life coach I worked with for several years, a man who really changed my life, Jeff Allen, he told me was, the human condition is when we climb to the top of one hill, we look to the next. That's always it, because if life, and you see this in individuals like trust fund babies and such, you see this when life is paved in gold and it's easy, you don't develop character, you don't develop that strength. And when you face these challenges, when you are given these opportunities for growth, that's the way I look at it. It's not hardships, it's opportunities for growth. Because nothing is inherent, this is the way I believe, and nothing is inherently evil or good in life. It is all subjective. Everything is subjective in life. And I just want to grow as a person, be able to help others. You know, I work in the medical field. My ultimate goal is to return to psychiatric care, get to work with mentally ill patients, work with addicts and alcoholics, because it's just something I love to do. I've always been passionate about it. Even since I was a kid, I wanted to help people. That was always my goal.
This is something Elliot said, and I love it. You know, as addicts, we see the world so widely and vividly, but then we go farther and we feel it, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's like that compassion, right? Like we've had it, and that's what I think as a kid, it's like that gets broken, right? And your heart breaks, and all of a sudden you start to see the pain in the world, but you see it so wide and so vivid, right? That you feel it on top of that. And it's just like, it's heavy, man. It's really heavy. But gosh, your story is absolutely insane. Like, just thinking back on it, dude, and I am so grateful to be sitting here with you right now and just learning the things that I've learned from you and hearing your story and just where you're at. Like, it's amazing, man. And your vulnerability is bar none.
Well, thank you.
I think that honestly is really why you're able to be in this chair today, man.
Yeah, I'm very grateful to my parents that they didn't give up on me and they got me the help I needed. You know, both of my parents, they had their struggles, and it's taken a lot. It's taken joint therapy sessions with them. It's at one point I had to go no contact with my mom for a year, but like, I have very healthy relationships with both of my parents now.
Awesome.
And because they were able to get me the help I needed at such a young age, and they never taught me that it wasn't okay for me to talk about what was going on.
That's
They
awesome.
never told me that I needed to stop crying. They never told me those sorts of things. So I am eternally grateful to have not had that type of trauma to have to unpack, because like so many men in society,
Totally, man.
even women, you know, toxic
yeah.
masculinity is ingrained within all of us in society.
Dude, and it's weird too, because the lack of masculinity can have an impact too. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's like, it just goes back to this, like, life is balance. It's
Yes.
all about trying to find balance.
Yep.
Right. And it's at times things are going to be out of balance. That's why we never reach the top. Right.
Yeah.
Because until you're going to have things that you got to balance out in your life. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, man, but I'm just incredibly grateful for you, for your story, for the time that we got to spend with you this morning.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm just like kind of having a hard time, like, I keep going through everything in my mind, and it's just such a wild story.
So something that we started this year,
Oh yeah.
we have every guest write down a question for the next guest. So I have a questionnaire for you.
Got
That you read the question, and then you get to write down a question for our next guest.
Okay.
So
You might know.
yeah, so you're gonna read the question, answer it, and then when we stop recording, you can write one down.
Think of people in your life who can you help out this week. Think of people in your life who can you help out this week. I can definitely help out my sponsee. He's struggling with a bit of a living situation catastrophe right now. Sober living could be rough at times.
I'm going through that as well.
Yep. With principles before personalities.
Yeah.
But that's really hard when you're less than a month sober, trying to keep that in mind.
That's good, man. I'm glad that you're there for him. Like, having somebody like you is awesome. You know,
Yeah.
that was huge for me too when I started. Was having a support recently.
Yeah, and getting to be a sponsor for somebody is so important. We're on step 1 right now, so it's up to him to write it down.
That's the hard part, right? Just getting him to put it on paper. But, well, with that, guys, we are going to let you go. We're going to end this episode. Tristan, thank you so much again, man, for your time,
course,
your
my
story. We'd love to have you back on at some point if you knocked out.
Of course.
So, yeah, we'll let you know. But thank you guys to our guests. We really appreciate you listening, tuning in, supporting us. We've noticed that our subscriber count on YouTube has been going up quite a bit. So please keep clicking those buttons, keep subscribing. Everything just helps us build our impact for our community. and just build the community. So we love you guys. We'll see you next week.